All right, good evening, everyone. Let's begin. So Baruch Hashem, it is a great schos Baruch Hashem to pick up. I think it's our first year after Yom Tovim. I apologize for the last minute cancellation last week, but thank you, Baruch Hashem, for good reasons. But it is a great schos Baruch Hashem to be back on track. I want to begin by thanking all of our sponsors, many sponsors for tonight's shir, our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, the Tilson family of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all of the shiurim and drushos of Tafshin Pei Hey. Baruch Hashem, an entire year of sponsorships. We thank them as a schus for Besoros Tovos, for their mishpach, and for all of Am Yisrael. And the following families for dedicating all of the shiurim and drushos for the month of Cheshvan. Stephen Terry Zinn for dedicating the shiurim and drushos this month in honor of the birth of their granddaughter, Devorah Eliana Zinn, and in memory of Dr. Zinn's father, Bunim Tzvi Ben Chaim Zichron Levracha, Shmuel and Rabin Karabkin, B'schus Refuah Shalima for Rabin's cousin, serving in the IDF, Binyamin Chaim Pesach Ben Moshe Chana, and a creation of the yahrzeit of her mother, Pesa Mira Bas Chaim. Dr. Moshe and Ellen Gevant, in memory of Dr. Gevant's parents, Yaakov Meir Ben Moshe Leib and Shena Bas Abba, as well as our week of learning sponsors, Judy Posner, in memory of Shimshon Lazer Ben Moshe Zechron Levracha, Chaim Ben Eliyahu HaKohen, Daniel Yehuda Ben Shimshon Lazer Zechron Levracha, and Selma Wolf and Leah Sol for dedicating the week of learning Le'ilui Nishmas in memory of Selma Wolf Zechron Levracha. May her memory be an inspiration for us all. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Sav and Aliyah, the families in Nechama, all of those who need a refuah shalei should have one together with Kol Chol Yisrael, Kadosh Baruch Hu Shel Eretz Hashem, return our hostages b'shalom and b'karav, and should allow our holy soldiers to be successful b'chol ma'asei yedehem. So let us begin. We have a lot to do today. These parshios and these weeks are filled with so many beautiful ideas and concepts that sometimes it's a little bit hard to even try to figure out exactly where to start. So, when in doubt about where to start, the best place to start is the beginning. So let's take a look at the opening part of this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayera. And I always find whenever it comes to the stories in Bereshis, because we are so familiar with the stories, all too often we don't necessarily look at them with a critical eye. But it's important sometimes to take a step back a little bit and just to contemplate a little bit. Just imagine for a moment you're looking at it for the first time. So let's take a look. Vayera alav Hashem be'elonei mamrei v'hu yoshei pesach al kechom hayom. Hashem appears to Avram Avinu in a place called Elonei Mamrei, and Avram Avinu is sitting at the entranceway of the tent in the heat of the day. Vayisa inav. Now again, remember, we know context. Context is Parshas Vayera follows on the heels of Parshas Lech Lecha, and at the end of Parshas Lech Lecha, we read of the dramatic episode of Avram Avinu circumcising himself at an advanced age. So again, we know the concept. Chazal tell us that Avram Avinu is sitting, recuperating from the bris milah. Okay, so what happens? Vayisa in the vayar v'hinei shlosha anashim nitzavim alav. There are three people there. Avram Avinu. So just the image. Avram Avinu is sitting by the entranceway of the tent, looking out. It's heat of the day. He sees three people. Vayaretz likrasam. He sees them. He runs to greet them. Pesach ol vayishtachu arza. Vayomer Adonai im nam atzasichim beinecha al na tavar me'al avdecha. Avram Avinu speaks to them in a very reverential tone. He says, "My masters, do me a favor. Don't pass by. Come inside. Allow me to host you. Yukach na ma'at mai brachatzu raglechem v'yishanu tachas ha'etz. Let me get you a little bit of water. Wash your feet. Spend the rest a little bit underneath the tree. Let me get you a little bit of bread. Eat a little something. Then you could continue on your journey. If you're already here, allow me to host you." And again, the strangers, the men respond, Vayomru kein ta'aseh kasher dibarta. Sure. And sure enough, they come inside and Avram Avinu hosts them. Okay, but the story goes on. Vayimara Avram ha'ohela Sarah. Avram Avinu runs into the tent to Sarah. Remember again, last week's parasha, Sarai was changed to Sarah. Vayomer Mahari shlosh si'im kemach solas lushi v'asiyugo. Sarah, prepare bread. We have guests. V'alaboka ras Avram. Avram Avinu runs to the calf. Vayikach ben bakarach vatov vayitin elanar vayimar lasos oso. And Avram Avinu takes the calf, gives it to the lad. The lad, we know, the Gemara tells us, is Yishmael, and Yishmael goes ahead and prepares it. Vayikach chama v'chalav ben abakar. Avinu takes butter and takes milk and takes the meat. Asher asa vayiten lifneim. He gives it before his guests. V'hu omeid aleim tachas ha'etz vayochelu. And he's standing over them, right by the tree. They're sitting in the shade of the tree, and they eat. Now we know the rest of this story, that these three men were no ordinary men, but instead, again, these were three angels. These were malachim, again, sent for different reasons. One of them was sent to announce the birth of Yitzchak, that Sarah was going to become pregnant, miraculous birth of Yitzchak. Another was sent to go ahead and save Lot and his family, and a third was sent to destroy the cities of Sodom and Amorah. But the question that we have to ask ourselves, well, I want to ask you, what's the question? You look at this section, what's the question? Imagine for a moment you're seeing this for the first time. What's the question? It's been too long since we've had our last year. Okay. Hey, so the simple question. This Torah is not a storybook. Torah is not, this is incredibly important. As much as we all love the stories of the Chumash, the Torah is a book of law. That's what it is. It's a book, it's a code of legal, moral, ethical statutes and lessons. It is not a storybook. So whenever you see a story, you have to wonder why it's here. And not only that, the more details the story has, the more, I'm going to use the word bothersome, but the more intriguing it is that the story is here. There's a lot of information over here. A lot of information. And the truth is, you really could have cut out all this information. If you wanted to consolidate the story, how would you consolidate it? Right? Three guys came, Avram said, come in, eat something, and then let's get to it. Let's get to it, right? Sarah's going to have a kid, we're destroying Sodom, we're saving Lot. In other words, you could cut out all of this information and consolidate this entire section. Just give me the meat, right? Just go ahead and give me the details, and let's move forward. But yet, there are no extra words in the Torah. There are no extra concepts in the Torah, and as such, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw fit to include this story in Pro and Front, and by the way, this is always intriguing to me because one of the most fascinating things about Torah is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides to include and what he decides to omit. I'll give you a simple example, right? Think about the things that are central to Yiddishkeit, like Shabbos. So we know on Shabbos how many malachas are there? 39 malachas. Where do we learn them from? Where are they stated? Right? Where are they stated? They're not. Right? This is important. The malachos of Shabbos are not stated. But Chazal learn out from the fact that Shabbos is juxtaposed to the section of the Mishkan. Why that juxtaposition? To teach me that whatever ultimately, again, was needed for the Mishkan is you can't do on Shabbos. So Shabbos, you think about this, it's so central to who and what we are, and yet the core, the essence of Shabbos is learned out from a juxtaposition. Tefillin. So how do we know that tefillin are supposed to be black? That tefillin are supposed to be square? How they're structured, the shin, they're not so many intricacies. The answer is none of it is written in the Chumash. In fact, the only thing the Torah says is that you're supposed to go out and tie a sign on your head and a totafos, which we don't even know what the word totafos means. Rashi says it's a compilation of two foreign dialects, tat and pat, of two different languages. Tefillin, again, something central daily to Yiddishkeit. Shabbos, something central to Yiddishkeit. And yet, when it comes to the core details of these mitzvos, you won't find them written in the Chumash. It comes in Torah Shebaal Peh, the verbal law, the oral law, transmitted from Moshe Rabbeinu Baruch Hu to Moshe Rabbeinu Har Sinai, and throughout the generations. And yet here, I come to Parshas Vayera, and the Torah is incredibly verbose about a story. Again, I love it. Everybody loves stories, but it begs the question of why. So obviously, we know the answer. In other words, we know the answer before we know the answer. I don't know why, but I know that if it's here, then what? Then it's meaningful. Then that must mean that there are many lessons to be learned and gleaned from this particular episode. So what I want to share with you over tonight is really just, interestingly enough, 4 different concepts that come out, and really to a certain degree unrelated concepts, but that all come out from different parts of this story. And I always feel through these things you see the beauty and profundity of Torah. One of the most exciting things about the incredible gift called Torah that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us is There's so much in it. And no matter how old you are or how many times you've seen these stories, there's always a new dimension of understanding to be extracted and extrapolated. Let's take a look at number 2. So actually, let's go out of order. Take a look at number 3. So the Rosh. The Rosh is Rabbeinu Asher. The Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, was one of the primary Talmidim of the Maharam of Rothenburg. The Rosh, was one of the first codifiers of halacha. He took the Gemaras and he codified halacha. So the Rosh writes in number 3. We're going out of order. In number 3, he says, Vayera alav, Perish Rashi, Levakir asachola. So remember again, the Rosh goes with the backdrop that the entire profundity of this story is that this story is the source for the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. Bikur Cholim. In fact, the Gemara says something amazing. The Gemara says that if you had to consolidate all of Yiddishkeit into like one mantra, it would be V'davak dabo, to cling to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the job of the Jew. I asks the Gemara, how can you cling to Hashem? How is that possible? So the Gemara says something very beautiful. How do you cling to Hashem? Divine emulation. Whatever God does, you do it too. So the Gemara said, and the Gemara goes through a whole list of things. For example, HaKadosh Baruch Hu clothes the unclothed. Where do we know that he did that? Adam and Chava. Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu buries the dead. Where do we know that from? Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu buried Moshe Rabbeinu. So whatever Hashem does, emulate that. So the Gemara says, Mahu mevaker cholim, the Ribono shel Olam does bikur cholim. Where do we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does bikur cholim? And by the way, I want to point out, right? We all know the mitzvah of bikur cholim. Where is the mitzvah of the bikur cholim written in the Torah? Where is it written? Answer is, it's not. It's not. This story, says the Rosh, is the Makar. This is the source for the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. Avram Avinu's 3rd day post-circumcision, which Chazal tell us is the most painful day, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows up to be with him. So the Rosh writes, quoting Rashi, Perish Rashi, L'vakir Sachola, Amr Bichamra ben Elazar, Yom Gimel Milasa Haya, Oba HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Shalo, Uperish leperush, Miloshon Vayera Muchach Shelo Ba Ela Levakro, Midlok Siv Achra Lo Amira Velo Diber. So this is incredible. The Rosh makes an amazing observation. So keep your finger on the place in number 3 for just a moment, and now look back up at number 1. Look how the Pesukim read. Vayera Elav Hashem Elonei Mamrei. V'Yoshe Hashem appeared to Avram Avinu at the entranceway of his tent in Elonei Mamrei. Now, if you were writing this, what would you have expected to come next? Hashem appeared to Avram. What should happen next? And Hashem said to Avram the following. Bless you. Yet, amazingly enough, there's no dialogue. There's no dialogue. There's no conversation between Hashem and Avram. Right? Look at the flow of the Pesukim. Hashem appears to Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu sees at the entrance of this tent. And the next thing is, Avram Avinu sees 3 men, 3 strangers, walking in the desert, and he invites them in. There's no dialogue. Says the Rosh something absolutely amazing. Look at source number 3, 3rd line in. Uba lelamed derecheres sheyesh lo li adam levaker achola. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is teaching us the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, but he's teaching us how to do Bikur Cholim. Va'afilu lo yedaber imo. Your job is not to speak with the person who is ill. Kigon shematzo yashen v'nechalo kashe yagido lechol kibaplon deroso. This is incredible. So it says the Rosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is teaching us Bikur Cholim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that how do you do Bikur Cholim? What is the Ikar mitzvah of Bikur Cholim? What is the Ikar mitzvah? Showing up. Showing up. There are some times in life where all you need to do is show up. So now the truth is the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim is a bit more nuanced than this, right? Because the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim actually is not to sit there and schmooze with the chola. In fact, sometimes cholim profoundly resent when people just show up and speak endlessly and endlessly and endlessly. The mitzvah of Bikur Cholim is actually to show up and to see if the chola needs something. But let's say the chola doesn't need something, so sometimes it's just not being alone, right? We all know this in life. There's something worse than suffering. What's worse than suffering? Suffering alone. So the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, says the Rosh, is just to be there with another person who's in distress. And this motif, by the way, carries over into other life cycle mitzvahs, like Nichum Avelim, consoling mourners, right? You see, one of the most common mistakes that people make is they go into a shiva home, and first of all, they think that it's their job to carry the conversation. And sometimes people even make a further mistake, and they think it's their job to speak about like the most mundane things to distract the mourner, as if anything you're going to say is going to take the Avel's mind off the loss that they just endured. But in fact, what is the mitzvah of Nichum Avelim? The mitzvah is just to show up. In fact, the halacha is you don't speak unless the Avel goes ahead and begins the conversation. And now we know it's very awkward, right? That's those silent, sometimes you've been in a Shiva home like that, where the Avel just does not feel like talking. So again, here's a good piece of Shiva home etiquette. What do you do if the Avel doesn't want to talk? What do? Leave. You don't have to sit there for just amounts of time. It's awkward for you, it's awkward for the Avel. Sometimes the greatest nechama is just knowing that other people care. That's all. You come, you show up, you sit for 5 minutes, the Avel doesn't want to talk, you say hamakom, and you go on your way. Bikur cholim, you go ahead and you go to someone who is struggling with something, struggling with illness. Sometimes the person doesn't want to talk. Sometimes the person is just depleted. Sometimes the person is just exhausted. But when they see that you came, that's beautiful. There's nothing, it's always important to understand. All of us, like when we encounter these situations like Bikur cholim or Nichum Avelim, right? Everybody's looking for the right words. See, here's a little secret. There are no right words, right? You're not going to discover, right, the verbal theological gem that is going to make sense of human suffering, right? Oh, you know what? This person came to me and they wow, I couldn't believe it. They said that thing, and now everything in the universe fell into perfect place, right? I'm not going to find it. You're not going to find it. It's not your job to enlighten. It's your job to be present. That's what we do for each other. We show up for one another. And it's not about what you say. It's just about being there. Who models that for us? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't show up and he doesn't say, Shefel, I'm so sorry. It must hurt so badly. But it's okay. You're going to be okay. You're such a tzaddik. You're so wonderful. Avraham Avinu was in pain. Probably a lot of pain. So what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say to him? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely not. But let me just sit next to you for a little bit. That is the mitzvah Bikur cholim. And again, by the way, this becomes a motif not just for Bikur cholim, but it becomes a motif for, in general, what is it that we can give each other, right? As a people, we're always striving to create achdus. We're always striving to create a sense of unity, national cohesion. It's the simplest thing in the world because all it requires is show up. Be there for the other. You don't have to know what to say. You don't even have to know what to do. Just show up in someone else's time of need. And maybe there's nothing they need you to say, there's nothing they need you to do, but they know that you were there in a moment of difficulty. And sometimes that's all a person needs to know. You can't take away my suffering. But if you're present, then I know that whatever I'm going through in life, I'm not going through it alone. So says the Rosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu teaches us over here two incredible lessons. Number one, the mitzvah Bikur cholim, and number two, a general motif in life. There's sometimes the most incredible thing you could do for someone else is just show up. That's why dafka, there's no dialogue. There's no Vayera alav Hashem, Vayomer Hashem al Avram, how are you feeling today? Or what can I do for you? Just simply HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows up, spends some time with Avraham Avinu, and that's the totality. Go, take a look at number two, source number two. A second, so that's our first. Again, I'm just showing you just the beautiful lessons that are extrapolated from this story. So suddenly you begin to see the story is not here because it's a nice and fun story. The story is here because there are major life lessons, moral, legal, ethical lessons and implications derived from here. Take a look at number two. The Medrash says, and this is beautiful. The Medrash says, Yukach na'at mayim al yidei shaliach. So the Medrash picks up on something very interesting. If you notice, so Avraham Avinu does a couple of things, right? He goes ahead and he gets them water, bread, and meat. I mean, the Pasukim also throw in here over here butter and milk, but we'll leave that out. We'll keep that together with the bread, right? So there's water, bread, and meat. So if you notice again, Avraham Avinu himself got the water. Yukach na'at mayim, he got them the water. The bread and butter and milk, that was Sarah, and the meat was Yishmael. So the Medrash says something absolutely amazing. The Medrash says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Af Aydi Shliach, Aydi Shliach, Af HaKadosh Baruch Hu Nasal Mayim Aydi Shliach, Shneimar Vikisa Batzor, Lechem Shnas. I'm sorry, I said that incorrectly. The water he got, Yukach Namam means let some water be drawn for you. That was through an agent, that was through a messenger, a Shaliach. The bread, Avram Avinu brought out himself. So the Medrash says something amazing. Just like Avram Avinu got the water for his guests through an agent, through a Shaliach, through a third party, so too HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us water through an intermediary as well. Where do we get water from? From the rock. From the rock, the rock, or first there was a rock that was the well of Miriam. And then through a rock. Yet bread, which Avram Avinu brought out himself, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us bread himself. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us bread, referring to the desert, the man. The man. Af HaKadosh Baruch Hu nasan es atzmo. So this is fascinating. So anything Avram Avinu did himself for the guests, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did himself for Abraham's children, for Klal Yisrael, for us. And anything Avram Avinu did through a messenger, through an agent, through a shaliach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did through a messenger, through an agent, through a shaliach. So again, Avram got water through a third party, we got water through a third party. Avram brought the bread himself, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the bread himself. What's the message that the Medrash is trying to highlight over here? In a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you get out what you are willing to put in. See, at the end of the day, so many of us walk through life and we feel uninspired. We feel uninspired. If you're feeling uninspired, the first question you have to ask yourself is, what are you putting into your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? If I'm just minimally involved in a relationship with God, checking boxes, doing what I have to do to satisfy my obligations, but not pushing myself any further, so don't expect inspiration out of that. An inspired relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the result of a person going above and beyond. Because think about it, what's inspiration? Inspiration means that, let's say a person normally feels at this level. Inspiration is my religious feeling and intensity is a level above. Well, you're not going to get that from God if you're not putting that into the relationship as well. Now, by the way, this is not unique. This is not unique to relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is relationships 101. Whatever you want out of a relationship, you must be putting in a reciprocal investment. If you're not investing, in other words, the amount that you're going to take out, that you're going to withdraw, same thing with your bank, right? You can't show up at Bank of America and say, I'd like to withdraw $10,000 if you have $100 in your account. It doesn't work that way. You could only withdraw that which you've invested. It's the way it works with relationships as well. You want something out of a relationship? The problem so often when we focus on relationships is we take what I like to call the magia li attitude, right? So a sense of entitlement. I'm entitled to this from a marriage. I'm entitled to this from a friendship. I'm entitled to this from a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The best thing you could do, the worst thing in life, is to walk around with a sense of entitlement. The best thing in life you could do is walk around life recognizing no one owes you anything. Your spouse doesn't owe you anything. They do, but don't act like they do. In other words, go with, no one owes me anything. Kadosh Baruch Hu owes me absolutely, God doesn't owe me anything. And as such, whatever I want to get out of the relationship, I have to be willing to invest. And again, what you're going to be able to withdraw is going to mirror the investment. So the Medrash says, whatever Avram Avinu pushed himself to do, that's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu reciprocated in the future as well. And whatever Avram Avinu, so to speak, outsourced, HaKadosh Baruch Hu outsourced as well. There's this reciprocity in relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is so incredibly important because so many times in life when we are feeling uninspired and when we are feeling perhaps even apathetic in our Yiddishkeit, it is so important to understand that 9.9 out of 10 times, that's because I'm not really investing. I'm not really putting a lot into this relationship. So if I'm putting in minimal investment, I'm gonna get minimal return. That's the way that it works. But the more you invest, the more you put in, ultimately, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu always reciprocates. This is a beautiful idea. I've mentioned this many times. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says, he quotes the pasuk in Tehillim, Hashem Tzilcha. Hashem Tzilcha. So we normally translate Hashem Tzilcha as Hashem is your shade. Hashem is your shade. And like the imagery is, right, the world could so often be like this blistering sun, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the shade. The Baal Shem Tov says, no. Hashem Tzilcha means Hashem is your shadow. Is your shadow. What does your shadow do? What does your shadow do? Whatever you do. Right? And that's the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's reciprocal. It's reciprocal. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, listen, I'll mirror, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, we're in a relationship together. Whatever you put in, I'm willing to reciprocate. But don't expect more from me, God, than what you're willing to invest. So if you're having a minimal investment, I'm going to give you a minimal return. But if you're willing to go above and beyond for me, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I will go above and beyond for you. Reciprocity in relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's lesson number 2. Take a look at source number 4. A third lesson. And again, I want to point out what to me, I always get very excited by these things because it's always incredible to see all of these life lessons that are, they're separate independent lessons and they're all true. They're all true. Separate independent lessons, all from the same 8 psukim of a great story that at first glance we have no idea why it's here. And meanwhile, again, Dvarim ha'omdim b'rumo shel, the most profound and incredible life lessons being gleaned from this. Look at source number 4, Rashi. Rashi says as follows. Now Rashi is intrigued by why is Avram Avinu in Elonei Mamre. Now Mamre is a guy. Right? Mamre is a person. The plains of Mamre means like the fields of Mamre. So Avram Avinu is interesting. Avram Avinu is not recuperating at home. Right? He's not convalescing at home. He's convalescing at his friend's house and Mamre's house. Right? Mamre's place. Right? So Rashi's like, why? Remember, Rashi is a reactive mefarish, which means Rashi only comments when he sees something strange in the verses that don't seem to make sense. So if you're Rashi, he's saying, why is Avram Avinu convalescing at Mamre's home? Why didn't he go back home to Beersheba, to where Avram Avinu was living at that time? Why is he in Mamre's home? So Rashi points out over here, Hu shenasan lo eitza al hamila lefichach nikla ala bechalko. So Rashi says something amazing. Apparently, Avram Avinu consulted with Mamre about the bris, about circumcision. So because he consulted with Mamre about circumcision, he comes back to convalesce at Mamre's home post circumcision, post bris milah. So that's the Canaan in number 5. Is interesting. What do you mean he consulted with Mamre about milah? What does that mean? What does that sound like? What was Avram Avinu contemplating? Should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? Kadosh Baruch Hu told him to do it. So what's the consultation? So the Das Sekinim says something beautiful. The Das Sekinim says over here, I'll just say this outside, Das Sekinim said he was contemplating with Mamre, should I do this like as a public thing or a private thing? In other words, Kadosh Baruch Hu told me to circumcise myself at an advanced age. So should I just do this at home, quietly, my family's there, or should I make it like a more public spectacle? And I don't mean that he did the bris milah publicly. I mean just like, should I create publicity around this? Like in the words of the Das Sekinim, should this be done b'tzina, like quietly, privately, or should it be done b'farhesya, publicly? And Mamre said to Avram, you do this publicly. This is big stuff. A man in his 90s undergoing circumcision because he heard from God that this is what he's supposed to do, this will make a monotheistic splash in humanity, right? This is going to get headlines. This is going to be overwhelming. People are going to hear about this, and you remember again, what was Avram Avinu's entire life mission? What was his life mission? To introduce HaKadosh Baruch Hu to humanity. That was Avram Avinu's mission. Mankind was steeped in idolatry. Avram Avinu's sole mission was, remember again, Avram Avinu wasn't Jewish. There were no Jews, right? Avram Avinu was a monotheist. He was the first monotheist. So his job was to introduce HaKadosh Baruch Hu to humanity. So Mamre says, this is how you do it. You use bris milah as a springboard. Because bris milah, in so many respects, represents what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants of us. Right? A refining of the self, a subjugating of the self, a channeling of wants and desires in different ways. So Avram Avinu, do this publicly. So therefore again, because it was Mamre who convinced him to do it publicly, therefore Avram Avinu almost like as hakaras hatov, almost like as a display of gratitude, convalesces at Mamre's home. But if you take a look at number 6, does Naim Torah, Rav Siratskin says something beautiful. And this is just incredible. Rav Siratskin writes, he says, we're not going to do all of this, but look at the right-hand paragraph. He says, Ukvar shalu rabim, eich afsher, sha'am lavinu, sha'am ba'asar nisyonos, o mehem bekiv shana esha, ba'akedas beno, v'lo notol eitzim mishumadam. It's interesting. So Naim Torah writes, Avram Avinu has gone through many tests, right? Including, again, the Akedah. Well, we didn't get to the Akedah just yet. But the Akedah, the Kiv Shanish, the fire furnace by Nimrod. When Hashem tells Avram Avinu, sacrifice your one and only son Yitzchak, Avram doesn't consult with anyone, right? He doesn't talk to Mamre. He doesn't even talk to who? Wife. He doesn't talk to his wife, right? He doesn't even tell Sarai Imenu what was going on. So he doesn't consult with anyone. And by the way, by all the other tests, we never find Avram Avinu consulting with anyone. Yet here says, as I'm a Torah, here, Kishnitstava alamila, Nisayon Shekol Echam Yisrael Meidbo, Halach, Lital Eitzam Avav. What's going on over here? So we don't find Avram Avinu consulting with anyone by any of the other tests, right? But yet, when it comes to Bris Milah, suddenly Avram Avinu is asking advice or consulting with other people. What's the pshat? And he says something amazing. He says, Umahaya Ozeh, Avram Avinu, and what happens if Mamre would have said, Avram, I don't think this is a good idea. Right? I don't know. Maybe try something else, like, I don't know, Shabbos, Kashrus, right? Maybe live the Bris Milah for the younger folk. Maybe it's not. If they would have said, don't do it, would Avram Avinu have listened to them? Of course not. Chaburah told them to do it. So if Avram Avinu was going to do it anyway, then what was the point of consulting with Mamre? And it's amazing because now the Torah says something amazing. He says as follows. He says, listen to this. V'hinei Avram, middle paragraph. V'hinei Avram, v'yishtadol lahasir es hahefserahu, u'kshenitstava lamo es atzmo, v'es kol anshe v'eso b'yom echad, choshav Avram u'matza, I'm just going to read two more lines, then we'll stop. He says, listen to this. This rest outside. The commandment of circumcision was not just on Avram, right? It was Avram should circumcise himself and all of the members of his household. Listen to this. Avram Avinu had a strategic alliance, a military alliance, with Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre. Right? They had like a what the right term for it is, like a defense pact, like a mutual defense pact, right? I'll be there for you, you'll be there for me. So Avram Avinu has himself, his household, 318 soldiers, right? We know again those are the ones who went out to the war of the 4 kings against the 5. We saw last week's parasha. So Avram Avinu says like this: if we all do bris milah, right, and the parasha all doing bris milah one day, then what happens? What happens to Avram Avinu's fighting force? What happens to his standing army? They're out of commission. At least for some amount of time, they're out of commission. Well, that puts Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre at risk. So therefore, again, says Azan Torah something absolutely amazing. He goes on, he says, Shaharihem somchin al shinun ches chanicha v'leidebeso, shiazru lahem b'mikra shamachama, ukishiyamo osam Avram b'yom echad, v'yiplu l'mishkav, v'yisparsim adar bein ayvehem. So if everyone hears that Avram and his household circumcised, now again, there's no standing army, it puts everyone else at risk. So Avram Avinu, before Avram Avinu takes action, he almost, not that he's asking permission, but he has to work it through with Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre to make sure that they're okay. Why? Because Avram Avinu cannot let his decision negatively impact someone else. Or otherwise stated, you cannot build your own spirituality on the back of other people. Or stated otherwise, even when building your own spirituality, you must be constantly and consistently, acutely aware of the feelings and the needs of the other. You see, sometimes, there's a Yetzer Hara in everything. What's the Yetzer Hara in Ruchnius? What's the Yetzer Hara in spirituality? What's the Yetzer Hara in spirituality? I'm working on my spirituality. So if I'm working on my holiness, then what? I'm putter from everything else in the world, including midos, right? Including midos. This is like a big issue with carpools, by the way, in the morning, right? It is a big mitzvah to bring one's children to school, to yeshiva in the morning. But it does not allow for one to block traffic. It does not allow for one to drive aggressively. And it does not allow for one to compromise their midos. Being occupied in the pursuit of holiness never allows you to trample upon other people. A Jew is always conscious and always aware of the needs of the other. See, even though God himself tells Avram Avinu, you need to do bris milah, Avram says, okay, I'm going to do it. But I have an obligation to honor Eshkol and Mamre. I have an obligation to them. So before I go ahead and I build my own ruchnios, which is beautiful and wonderful, listening to God, I need to make sure that it doesn't put someone else at a disadvantage. And by the way, this is Avram Avinu through and through. You know, we saw this last week's parashah. Remember last week's parashah? The Torah says, remember, we know the whole story, that Avram gets to Canaan, right? And right when he gets to Canaan, what does he find? There's regional famine. So where does he go? Mitzrayim. So that was the whole debacle of Paro and Sarah, or Sarai back then. And then the Torah says now famine is over, or famine's not over, but Avram Avinu essentially gets kicked out of Mitzrayim. And he goes back up to Canaan. And the Torah says something absolutely amazing. Vayelech l'masa'av. Literally, he went according to his journeys. And Rashi says, this is incredible. Avram Avinu went to the same hotels, so to speak, right? It's not like a straight shot from Canaan to Mitzrayim. You have to stay over at different inns. Avram Avinu was makbid to stay at the same inns on the way back than he did on the way down. Now, understand something. Avram Avinu on the way down was poor. Avram Avinu on the way back was rich. So on the way down, it was Motel 6, right? On the way back, it could have been the Waldorf, right? He had the money. He had the money to do it. But Avram Avinu didn't do that. Wherever he stayed on the way down is where he stayed back on the way up. So ask the Maharal, why? Why? Now, I'll say something amazing. Avram Avinu was concerned that if he would not stay at the same inns, what would happen? People would say, oh, you see, Avram Avinu stayed there on the way down. He didn't stay there on the way back. It must be that what? The service is terrible. Right, the rooms are terrible, this, that. And Avram Avinu didn't chas v'shalom want anyone to be compromised because of his lodging choices. This is a tzaddik. This is a tzaddik. People think that it's the amount of Torah that you learn that makes you a tzaddik. Now, the amount of Torah that you learn is a component. But that's not what really differentiates tzaddikim from regular people. What really makes tzaddikim is a hyper emphasis on midos, is a hyper emphasis on sensitivity to the other. That no matter how holy my mission is in life, I never trample on the feelings or on the needs of another. That no matter how important it is, whatever it is that I'm doing, I'm always acutely aware of what is happening with the other. So the same Avram Avinu, who again made sure to stay at the same inns on the way back up from Egypt to Canaan, even though he had much more money now, that same Avram Avinu says, okay, I have to do bris milah, but I also have a responsibility to honor Eshkol and Mamre. So before I just jump in and do this, I have to talk with them. Again, it wasn't consulting, should I or shouldn't I? Of course he was going to do it. Baruch Hu told him to do it. But it was a consultation about how can I do this in a way that doesn't chas v'shalom adversely impact you. Avinu teaches us the profound lesson that even when engaged in the holy pursuit of building your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can never take liberties with the feelings, the dignity, or the needs of the other. That tzaddik is constantly and perpetually preoccupied with the implication and impact of his or her actions upon all of those around him. Last approach. With this, we'll stop for tonight. Take a look at source number 7, the Radak. So again, like all of these details. So again, you begin to see all of these. Now I understand why Mamre. Okay. Now, one other detail. It's interesting. Avram Avinu says, he invites his guests and he tells them, Hish'anu tachas ha'etz. Why don't you rest under the tree? So once again, shkoyach, very nice, beautiful, rest on the tree. Well, I don't care. I don't care if they're under the tree, under a rock, it doesn't, in other words, again, as the reader, it doesn't matter to me, right? But it does. Obviously it does. Kadosh Baruch Hu included this detail. It means that somehow, some way, the tree is important to me as well. So what's the pshat? So if we take a look at number 8, source number 8. So this is beautiful. So he says, so first of all, the Radash, everything shouldn't skip. The Radash says in number 7, why rest under the tree? Let's say Allah eats kikachom hayom. I remember again, it was very hot outside. And therefore, again, Avraham Avinu also understood that it was going to take him some time to prepare the meal. He was preparing a meal for them. So he was preparing bread, takes some time. So preparing a calf takes some time. All this stuff takes time. So therefore, again, he says, why don't you just relax under the tree? This way, while I'm preparing the food, you'll go out and you'll be relaxed. Okay, very beautiful, very wonderful, but still leaves me wondering, why do I need to know it? Take a look at number 8. This is incredible. The Degel Machaneh Ephraim says something beautiful. He says, V'zeh Shomer HaKosov, V'hish'anu tachas ha'etz. That hay in Hebrew is called the hay hayediyah, the definitive article. Which means it could have just said, Vishanu tachas eitz. Rest under a tree. Well, rest under a tree. It doesn't translate well in English. But it just means rest under a tree. Which tree? Which tree? Whatever tree you want. It doesn't matter. Choose a tree. Any tree. Right? Vishanu tachas ha'etz means, and why don't you go ahead and rest under the tree? Definitive article. We're talking about a specific tree. It says, listen to this. Get ready for this. This is so beautiful. He says, number 8. V'zeh shomer hakosov v'shanu tachas ha'etz behei hayidua hainu b'hatorah shehi eitz chayim hi lamachazikim ba. So ultimately, he says the Degel Machaneh Ephraim, Hishanu tachas ha'etz is Avraham Avinu, metaphorically referring to, literally, shade yourself under Torah. Torah is also compared to a tree. Eitz chayim hi lamachazikim ba, a tree of life to those who cling to it. So it says the Degel Machaneh Ephraim, Avraham Avinu is telling these 3 men, these 3 strangers, why don't you go ahead and shelter, right? Spend a little bit of time under the shade of spirituality, of Torah. Now, what does this mean? So take a look at number 9. In the Sefer Imre Yosef, this is quite beautiful. So remember again, let me take a step back, and I didn't include this on the sheet. Remember, at this point in time, who does Avraham Avinu think these people are? Who does he think they are? Just regular guys. Just regular guys. Now, there's an important piece in this story, and not just regular guys. He thinks that they are pagans, right? Or idol worshippers, idolaters, right? Why? Because Rashi points out, that, again, I didn't put it on the sheet, but in fact, when Avraham Avinu says, back in source number 1, Pasuk Dalet, verse 4, Yukachna ma'at mayim v'rachatzu ragleichem. Avraham Avinu says, take some water and wash your feet. And wash your feet. Rashi says, why is he saying that? Because he was concerned that they were Ovdei Avodah Zarah, they were idolaters who worshipped the dust. Apparently they were dust worshippers. Avraham Avinu did not want Avodah Zarah in his house. In other words, it's another beautiful lesson. As accepting and loving as Avraham Avinu was of all people, you always have to be careful what you allow into your house. Right? So in other words, Avraham Avinu has space in his heart for everyone, but there is no idolatry in the house. No idolatry in the house. It's such a profound lesson in chinuch, such a profound lesson in creating a home of kedusha. A person has to be careful what they allow into their home. In any event, so Avraham Avinu says, wash off the dust from your feet. I don't want idolatry in my house. So now watch this. Look at number 9. So again, he quotes the Imre Yosef. The Imre Yosef was Rav Yosef Meir Weiss, who was the Rebbe of Spinka, who lived from 1838 to 1909. So he says, listen to how beautiful this is. We're going to conclude with this. He says, Imre Yosef Zal, so understand, everybody's bothered by the same question, which is the question we started out with, which is, why the story? Why the story? I don't need to, again, love stories, but don't need stories. Torah is a book of law. So why the story? So remember again, we've seen so far 3 different approaches as to why the story is not just simply a story. The life lessons, the halachic lessons that come out. Says the Spinker Rebbe something absolutely amazing. He says, there's a greater life metaphor in this entire story. What's the greater life metaphor? Listen to this. Ki b'vo lumo Torah, v'moli b'chatoim, mikaf regel, v'ad rosh ein bo mesom. So listen to how beautiful this is. Sometimes I look in the mirror, and what do I find? I find that I am a broken person. A broken person, right? And you know, it's only Cheshvan. It's only like 2 weeks after the Yamim Noraim. And it's amazing how quickly we break. And it's amazing how quickly we revert and how quickly we regress and how quickly we fall off the spiritual wagon. But sometimes I look in the mirror and I'm so profoundly unhappy with the person that I am. And the Rebbe says a beautiful metaphor. He says, raglechem. Sometimes the quote-unquote the impurities and the broken kite is literally again from my feet all the way to my head. Sometimes I just feel like a completely broken person. So what's the danger when you feel like a completely broken person? What's the danger? Right? Yeyosh, Rabbi Nachman says, the greatest danger in life is not sin. Right? Why is that not the greatest danger? Because we all sin. We all sin, right? The only variable is how often you sin and what sins you perform. But every single one of us commits averos every single day. That is part of the fabric of the human condition. Rabbi Nachman says the greatest existential danger to us is not sin, it's yeyosh. It's that we give up on ourselves. That sometimes I feel so broken because I feel broken literally again from head to toe or from toe to head, right? I feel so broken that I feel like I can't get it together. And especially, you know what the interesting part about sin is? What's the interesting part about sin? I know you're old Nashim said Kanyo, so no one can answer it. I'll tell you what's interesting about sin. What's interesting about sin is rarely do you find yourself committing new averos, right? Isn't that interesting? It's not the pshat that like one day I never tried that one before. This is an interesting experience, right? The way it works with sin, which is quite fascinating, is for many of us, it's the same averos. It's the same stuff, right? Think about it. When you come to Rosh Hashanah and you're clapping Yom Kippur, Slichos, and I'm clapping Al Chet Ashamnu Bagadnu, it's not the pshat that like this year I have 10 brand new averos that I never committed before, right? 10 new stuff. I'm not diversifying my sin portfolio, right? The reality is, for many of us, for most of us, it's the same stuff all the time. Maybe it manifests itself in different ways, but it's the same averos all of the time. And sometimes that hurts even more because at least if I'm doing different averos, at least I could say, okay, I got a handle on the old ones and I moved on to new stuff. It's even more debilitating when I find myself struggling with the same things year in, year out, decade in, decade out, and I just can't get it together. And suddenly I feel like such a profoundly broken person. And when that happens, it is so easy to slip into the clutches of yeyosh, the clutches of despair, and to give up. And once you give up, it's interesting. The story's not over when you sin, because we all sin. The story's over when I give up. So says the Rebbe something amazing. He says, a person looks at themselves, and they are filled with sin, literally again from their feet to their head. So what should you do? It's incredible. What do you do when you feel so overwhelmingly broken? So what's the answer? I'm source number 9, 4 lines in. Yukachna ma'at mayim. What should you do when you feel so broken? Take a little bit of water. What's water? Yikach v'yilmod ma'at Torah. She'in mayim ela Torah. What do you do when you feel so broken? What do you do? And it's incredible because sometimes when we feel broken, we feel so distant from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when I feel distant from Hashem, engaging in a spiritual fashion seems totally doesn't make any sense. But that's exactly what I'm supposed to do. When I feel broken, what do? You immerse a little bit in the water of spirituality. You ingest a little bit of water of spirituality. Not a lot, because I'm not holding there by a lot. But yukachna ma'at mayim. Take a little bit of water. Try just to give yourself just a little bit of extra spirituality, a little bit, however you're going to do it, a little bit of davening, a little bit of chesed, a little bit of tzedakah, a little bit of Torah, whatever your water is, whatever your spiritual water is, just take a little bit, and just understand how the Rebbe sees it in Psukim. Avraham Avinu sees idolaters. They're covered from head to toe in idolatry. Avraham Avinu says, come here, let me show you what to do to fix yourself up. Yukach ma'at mayim. Don't start with a lot of spirituality. Just a little bit of spiritual, a little bit of water. And when you do that, listen to this. V'al yidei esek Torah yikuyim ba v'rachatzu raglechem sheyirchatz v'yinakeh atzmo mikol tuma v'hala shedibek bo. So what do? And it's amazing. Yukach na'mat mayim. Take a little bit of water. And what do you do with that little bit of spirituality? What do you do? You clean your feet. In other words, start somewhere with getting yourself back together. Sometimes the greatest challenge we face in life is that when we feel broken, I feel broken in so many different ways, in so many different areas, that I don't even know where to start. And what happens in life when you become overwhelmed by a problem, you don't know where to start? What do most of us do? Generally nothing, right? If I'm so overwhelmed and I don't know where to start, I generally just don't start. Says Rebbe, why? If you feel totally broken, okay, take a little bit of water of spirituality and just start somewhere. Wash your feet, right? Start at the bottom. Start with something simple. Start with something basic. Just take some water of spirituality and begin to repair yourself. And now watch this. He says, after that, if you take a little bit of water, what should you do next? Vihishanu tachas ha'etz. Now, what does he say next? Then go ahead and rest underneath the tree. Now, by the way, hishanu tachas ha'etz actually doesn't really mean to rest on the tree. What does it actually mean? To lean on the tree. To support yourself against the tree. Tachas haTorah hakidosha shehi eitz chayim hila machazikin ba. So listen to what the Rebbe sees. Listen to what the Rebbe sees in this beautiful, beautiful story. What he sees with Avram Avinu and the three strangers is the most profound life metaphor. Avram Avinu represents who we want to be. The three guys wandering around the desert represents who we are. So there's who I want to be, Avram, and there's who I am. And there's who I am, which is like wandering around the desert of life. Feeling lost, feeling broken, feeling covered by the dust of my imperfections and my wrong turns in life. And so I'm wandering, feeling so bad, feeling so compromised, feeling so broken. And my good version of me, my Avram Avinu me, almost calls me over and says, why are you wandering? Why are you wandering? You're broken? Okay, join the club, we're all broken. So here's what you do. How do you remedy your broken kite? The way you do it, bless you. How do you remedy your broken kite? Yukach nama atmayim. Start with infusing yourself with a little bit more spirituality. A little bit more. Choose it. What is your additional pocket of, what is your additional spiritual water? And just begin slowly but surely to go ahead and wash your feet. Start somewhere. You can't fix all of your problems, but start with fixing something. And the more you do that, you'll recognize something amazing. Vihishanu tachas ha'etz. Torah, the Ribono Shel Olam, is not there to judge us. It's there to support us. We sometimes forget that the Ribono Shel Olam wants our success more than we want our success. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu essentially says, lean on me. Hishanu tachas ha'etz. Lean on me. It's okay. You can lean on me. In other words, support yourself while you're washing your feet, while you're getting your life together, while you're ingesting some of those waters of spirituality in an effort to go ahead and remedy your broken kite. Vihishanu tachas ha'etz. Go ahead and lean on spirituality. Lean on God. Believe in yourself. Take small steps, and you'll be able to fix that which is broken. And what's incredible, by the way, is if you look at the next part that Avram Avinu says, after you go and take a little bit of water, and you begin by washing your feet, and you go ahead and you lean on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you lean on Torah, you lean on the spirituality to help remedy yourself, what comes next? Ve'ekcha pas lechem, v'sa'adu libchem. Over time, you'll satiate yourself. If you take things slowly, ingest the waters of spirituality, begin to fix things that are broken one step at a time, a little bit at a time. Recognize that Chash Baruch Hu is not there to judge you. Chash Baruch Hu is there to support you. Then over time, you'll be able to satiate yourself. Right? We know the greatest life satiety doesn't come from a good meal. The greatest life satiety comes when you feel accomplished, when you feel happy with yourself, when you're content with the life that you're living and the version of yourself that you have created. And all of that starts how? Simply by beginning slowly, incrementally, by taking a little bit of spiritual water, beginning to wash your feet, beginning to fix the things that are broken a little bit at a time. And before you know it, you're sitting down, satiated and happy with the person that you have become. And in fact, amazingly enough, David HaMelech writes this as well in Tehillim. We're not going to get into this, but just quickly, David HaMelech says, Erchatz b'nikayon kapai v'asovava es mizbechacha Hashem David HaMelech says literally again, the first step in life is washing away the impurities. The first step in life is taking the water of spirituality and using it to begin to wash away, to address the things that are broken. Then and only then can you sit down at the table of personalistic satiety. Then and only then can you circle the Mizbeach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then and only then can you enjoy a true relationship with Hashem. So therefore, again, it turns out that what appeared as just a very nice story, a beautiful story, a wonderful story, turns out to not only give us, yes, some nice historical information, but in fact gives us incredible and impactful lessons for personal growth, for actual self-actualization in life, for how to go ahead and treat others, for how to go ahead and build a meaningful relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and ultimately, how to fix that which is broken within ourselves. We'll stop over here for tonight. Mishkayach, everyone.